It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Wyatt coming from Oklahoma, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be chatting with Wyatt and his father, Wes. And Wyatt's actually 12 years old. They live in Oklahoma. And Wyatt's going to be sharing some strange encounters he had around his dad's property. And I got a chance to talk with Wes, too, as well. And he'll be sharing some of the weird things he's experienced on the property. And then we're going to be chatting with Nathan and Dan. And they come to us from Utah. Nathan is 14. He was on the bus and he looked over at this field. They're in the middle of nowhere and he saw this very strange creature. Very fascinating stuff. I love father and son, you know, both of them coming forward and sharing what happened to them. And we'll wrap up with Dan, who is a delivery driver from Oregon. He was on the McKenzie Pass. And if you're from Oregon, you know that area is pretty notorious for sightings. And Dan's going to be sharing what happened to him when he was out doing his deliveries. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Wyatt to the show. Wyatt, thanks for coming on. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for sending me your email. And I know that your dad's on the line too as well. Wes, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have you guys. And Wyatt, let's start with you. I know this property is out in Oklahoma. If you would just kind of start from the beginning, kind of tell us what happened and kind of walk us into what you saw.
Okay, so we wanted to move out into the country, so we, my dad and my mom bought some land, started building a house. After the house was built, we instantly moved in. One of the first nights there, I went to bed, and in my room, I have two windows. I have a bigger window, and then I have a smaller window. And my bed was facing straight towards my bigger window, and I could, if I woke up, if I sat up in my bed, I could look straight at it. So since we had just moved in, we didn't have any blinds yet, and we were going to get those in the coming week. So I had gone to sleep. At the time, I was only, I think, 5 because we just moved in. I go to sleep, and I wake up to, I don't know what I woke up to, but there was 2 glowing red eyes outside my window from the glare of my nightlight that I had on because I was afraid of the dark. So I just saw 2 red glowing eyes and I could see the outline of it because it was blacker than outside. And where we live, sort of like a pasture. Our land's like a pasture, sort of. We have 3 acres, and we live in the very middle of it, and everything around us is cut down, so we can see all around us. And so the moon glares down on us really, really well, and it's usually pretty bright outside. So I just saw this thing like bent over, and my window's probably 7 feet tall, and this thing was bent over looking through my window. And that scared the hell out of me because you don't think of waking up in the middle of the night to see something right outside your window.
Yeah, no kidding. It would have scared me too as well. And so what did you do? Did you stay there? Did you get up and leave the room?
No, as soon as I saw this thing, I ripped my sheets off my bed and I ran straight to my parents' room. And at the time, I wasn't even thinking. I just jumped on my parents' bed, didn't care if they woke up or not. But I was just scared to death, so I just instantly jumped onto their bed. And from then on, I just never really liked looking out windows at night because I was always afraid something like that could happen again.
Yeah, it's scary enough to have something looking in your window, but to have it be red eyes, something with the color red, the red eyes almost make it worse, don't you think?
Yeah, because at the time, my dad was into Bigfoot too. And so he would watch movies about it, and it scared me. And he would tell me stories, and it scared me about it. And so seeing these 2 red glowing eyes looking through my window just scared me so bad because I'm like, this thing's bending down to see through my window, which is huge.
Yeah, no kidding. Was that the only experience you had on that property? What?
No, I've had 2 actually.
Tell me about the other one.
Okay, so the other one, so my dad, this was probably when I was around 7 years old, 8. And my dad, he owned a motorcycle at the time. And in our backyard, we had made a chicken coop and had chickens in it. And right next to that, we had a shed. My dad kept his motorcycle out in the shed so it wouldn't get rained on or any of that. And he'd ride that to work every day super early in the morning. Well, I could usually always hear the door open and close. And man, this was the scariest encounter out of both of them. Because I remember multiple times my dad had opened the door and closed it, and I would go out there and I would see my dad getting ready for work, like putting on his boots, getting ready to go out to his motorcycle. This time, I'd heard our back door open and close, but we had our actual door, and then we had a screen door, and I heard the screen door open and close. And so I go out there and I unlock the door and all of that because I was thinking, okay, my dad already locked the doors to leave. And I see this figure walking towards my chicken coop and my shed where my dad had kept his motorcycle. It was super bulked up, had what looked like the head outline of a canine, like maybe like a German Shepherd. And my dad is pretty swole. He likes to lift, runs a lot, goes to the gym a lot too. And so I thought, okay, it's just my dad going out there. And at the time, I wasn't really checking what it looked like because I thought, okay, this is just my dad. There's nothing really I need to look about him, just my dad. So I started screaming, Dad, really loud at the top of my lungs. And I just kept on screaming it and screaming it and screaming it. And I don't know if I ticked this thing off or what, but it turns around super slow. Like, first, it, looks back and keeps on walking. And then it actually turns its whole body around and starts walking back towards me. That's when my mom came, and she grabbed me by the arm and she said, "What are you doing?" and closed both doors and locked them. And she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just screaming for Dad to come back because he's going to get on his motorcycle to leave for work." And she goes, "Son, come here." And she takes me to her room, and she brings me right to where my dad would be sleeping. And she said, "Look." And my dad was fast asleep, not even ready for work.
Jeez.
So that really scared me.
Yeah, I bet. So it was pretty far down in the yard then. I mean, it wasn't like right next to the door or anything. It was pretty far away.
No, it was pretty far away. I'd say probably 30, 40 yards.
Yeah, that's still pretty close, Wyatt. Still really, really close. Wes, let me ask you real quick, because I talked to Wyatt the other day, and everything he was saying was pretty right on. There's a lot of things he was talking about that I was shocked by, but I wanted to ask you, being the dad, have you experienced anything strange around that property? Have you experienced anything going on around that property?
Yeah, I've had a couple. I've never had any like face-to-face encounters like Wyatt has had, but I do remember one morning I got off work and I got home about, and all this happened back around 2014, 2015 time. Remember, it was cold. It was that fall. And yeah, I rode my motorcycle home from work, got home. It was probably about 6:30 in the morning. It was still pitch black out. Like Wyatt said, we got the storage building out back, and it's, 40, 50 yards from the house. And so I put it up and everything and locked the door, and I started walking back towards the house, and I heard this noise, like kind of like a call. And I'd never heard it before. We have owls and stuff around here. And at first I thought, no, maybe that's it. But, I'd never heard an owl kind of sound like that. The sound, the only way I can describe it, it was kind of a whooping sound. It was kind of like on your intro, you hear that whoop, whoop,
Yeah.
whoop. And I made the call right back to it. And like I said, it's pitch black. I can't see anything, but it's pretty close. Now behind our property, it's just thick woods. There's about 120 acres or so back there, and it's just all woods. And like I said, I made the call back to it, kind of mocked it, and it did it right back. And I thought, man, this is kind of weird. And I did it again, and I never heard anything else. I never heard anything. And I thought, man, this, like I said, I've always kind of been interested in Bigfoot. I thought it was kind of neat. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, well, I don't know what it is. I don't think it's an owl. And then of course, Wyatt had already had his encounters that he had told me. And I remember hearing, on some Bigfoot videos, like on YouTube, you get some vocals and stuff. And I thought, man, that sounds kind of like some of the stuff I've heard, but, there's no definite what it was. I couldn't see anything, but I thought it was pretty strange. Fast forward about a year after that, I was out hunting, not far from my property, not too far from where I heard the sounds. And remember I was out there and I was just bow hunting on the ground. It's just typical fall day out there deer hunting. And as I'm sitting there, I just started noticing, I'm like, man, everything just died down. There was no noise in the woods. And there was also, there was no wind that day. It was just real calm. And I thought, man, this is kind of weird. I couldn't hear any squirrels or birds or anything like normal. And as I'm sitting there, all of a sudden, I just hear this huge crash behind me. And it's so thick in there, I can't see back behind me very far. But I hear this huge crash of this tree just falling and hitting the ground. And like I said, there's no wind, no anything. And I thought, well, it's time to get out of here. So I just, ventured back, to the house. And I don't think I'd been back out there since, especially not in that area anyway.
Yeah, it's unnerving though, isn't it? When it's like the vibe in the air changes, the whole environment changes. It's really hard to explain. I know what you mean. I've experienced that before, and it's immediately you're on alert, Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was just the strangest thing. I mean, it's not like this big, huge dead tree just decides to fall over, right then and there. Something pushed it over. You could hear like roots snapping, it sounded like. And so I don't know, who knows what it was, but I thought that was pretty strange. I do have a story though, another one. My ex-wife, she grew up about 1.5 miles from this property. And I remember her telling me one time that it was 1994. She was driving down the road with her mom. They were headed home. And like I said, it's out here on a country road. And it was nighttime. And she said they were just driving down the road towards her house. And this road was about 1 mile from where I'm at currently. She said as they was going down the road, they noticed something on their right stood up. This big, hairy something just stood up. It was bipedal and started running alongside their vehicle through the bar ditch. And then all of a sudden just angled off to the right, cleared a barbed wire fence, just went right over it and just went straight off into the woods, which was it was real thick at the time, a lot of cedars and everything. I remembered that, that she told me that story years ago, and then just kind of the things happening around here, just the things that, Wyatt has seen and just the things that I've heard. It definitely sounds like there's some kind of activity or something out here.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. It's fascinating. A lot of times in the situations, Wes, the kids always see it first. For whatever reason, the kids always see it first. They'll go tell their parents. Most of the time they get blown off by it. Either they're imagining something or they saw a bear go back to bed, that sort of thing. But it's weird that kids seem to notice these things first. What really bothers me is that dogman creature Wyatt's talking about. I do get a lot of dogman reports out there in Oklahoma, and I don't know what that thing is, and I just don't trust it. Who knows what that thing is? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and at the time, like I said, we just moved in, and I thought, well, maybe he's just nervous out here, and I thought it was kind of maybe his imagination at first, but I believed him. He had no reason to lie, And the thing that really got me is I'd never heard about the red eyes until just the last 2 or 3 years after listening to your podcast. And then I remembered that because whenever he told me the story and he said red eyes, I just automatically thought, oh, well, what's that all about? But then I've heard all these stories and these encounters of red eye shine. And it took me straight back to that story. And Wyatt didn't know anything about that. I never even knew anything about that. So for him to say that he saw something hunched down looking through the window with red eyes, I mean, wow, that's just crazy.
Yeah, it's spooky. And it's like I was telling Wyatt, the red eyes almost make it worse. You know what I mean? For whatever reason. I don't know what it is about the color red, especially at night, and them being eyes. It seems, in my mind, I think evil right off the top of my head. It's has there been anything new happen at the property, or is it pretty much died down?
I haven't heard or seen anything since. The past couple years, like I said, it was really wooded back there. I still have probably, 5 acres of just thick woods behind me, but the rest of the property's all been dozed down. It's more pasture now. So yeah, I haven't heard or seen anything since, and neither have the boys. So
yeah, that's good news.
Yeah.
For especially being a dad, it would concern me, especially when a lot of times in these situations. Thank God, Wes, that you and your ex-wife were, somewhat knowledgeable about the subject, because a lot of kids get shut down pretty quick whenever they see things like this. Well, what do you think that they are, Wes? What do you think that Sasquatch actually is?
Man, I don't know. At one time, I thought I was pretty confident that it was, just possibly an ape or something. But, there's just too many variables that happen in the different stories. And, I don't know. I don't know if it's something, Nephilim, or, you get into the paranormal aspects of it and the orbs. And I really couldn't tell you, and that's what's it's so strange and intriguing. I have no answer really.
Yeah, and that's understandable. Let me ask you, Wyatt, what do you think that Sasquatch is?
I have no clue. Like my dad said, I thought it was an ape, but you hear other stories and you think maybe it's a hybrid, like a man or something. And then you hear another story and you just get thrown around with you not knowing what it is because of all these encounters, and they're all different. And yeah, there are some that are the same, but almost every single encounter has something in common, but it's also totally different. You never actually know what it is. And I don't think anybody will know until we get cold, hard proof of what this thing really is.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. What about that dogman creature that you saw? What's kind of your gut tell you what that thing is? And again, there's no wrong answers. I don't even know what it is,
In all honesty, I think it might be a demon. Because you hear those stories of like the goat man, him being a demon, or the devil showing up in a form of a goat, or just weird stuff like that. And I think it could be a demon or a different chain of the Bigfoot, because sometimes they act the same as one, but they also can be more they can be more aggressive, just want to pick more fights. After hearing stories from your show and from going from to Bigfoot conventions, it's just crazy what you hear.
Yeah, you might be right on that, Wyatt. You might be right on your theory there. You're a smart kid. You know your history. You know in religion that the goat and the devil are one and the same. That's where we get the term the scapegoat.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother topic. Yeah, I hope that the dogman isn't a demon, but a lot of people do report it gives off that vibe. A lot of people say it's evil. Doesn't give off the I want to be buddies vibe. You know what I mean? I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah. And if I've thought about it over the years, and from both accounts, the first one, I think Bigfoot, or whatever the creature was, I think it was just curious because that was one of our first days ever moved into it. Moved in, and we had plowed down a lot of trees and cut a lot of stuff down in our property so we could build this house and have a good backyard. So I think that it got pretty mad about that, and it wanted to check out what we were doing on its land. Because we live 4 miles from a town. It's a little town. And then I don't think we have some neighbors. We have a pretty decent neighborhood, and then we have 2 lakes that we live by, and those have huge houses and those. But I think that it was curious of why we moved in and why we had chopped down some brush. I think with that dogman encounter, I think it had came up, opened that screen door, and checked to see if our door was unlocked to come inside.
Yeah, that is a strange part where you heard the door open. You thought it was your dad leaving. Did you ever ask your mom if she opened the door? She was probably in bed.
No, because she was asleep, and she had woke up, and I think she had a gun. I think she had grabbed a gun and had thought I was an intruder, and she said, she grabbed me and she said, "I thought you were an intruder trying to break into the house." And then that's when she told me all of that, and she brought me to her room, and I saw my dad asleep. But I think that was trying to get into our house, and then it started walking back to our chicken coop. And at the time, we had chickens. Now we don't, because, man, there are some huge coyotes. I think the first night that we had chickens, we had a ton of raccoons that came up, and my dad shot some of those and killed them. And there was one that weighed at least 40 pounds, a raccoon that weighed 40 pounds. My dad had to grab it by he had to grab it with two of his hands. And the thing was fatter than most dogs. I mean, this thing was huge. And it had been eating off of something. It weighed 40, 50 pounds.
Yeah, that is a big raccoon. Do you want to see another creature, or are you kind of happy that, it's all the forest is kind of down now and hopefully they moved on?
I want to see another one, but at the same time, there are all these people that have seen them, and it just changes their whole life. And those two definitely changed my life, not for the better, I guess you could say, because sometimes you just don't want to be out in the woods because of something like that. And I've heard of stories of hunters that have seen things like this, and they just don't want to hunt. They're afraid of what they'll see again. I want to see one, but I feel like it would change my life even more, and I don't want to have to feel all that fear rushing through my body every time I'm in the woods or something.
Yeah, that's understandable. Hopefully they've kind of moved on, and they're not in the area anymore. And encounters are easier when it doesn't happen at home. You know what I mean? When you're hiking and you're, 100 miles away from your home, or it's a whole different situation when it happens at home.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating account, Wyatt. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share what happened to you. And thank you so much for listening to the show.
Thank you for letting me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. And I know your dad's here too as well. Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got Nathan's email the other day regarding his sighting. When did the sighting actually take place?
It was in December of 2019.
Okay, very recent. If you would you just kind of start from the beginning, kind of tell us what you were doing and walk us into what happened?
So it was winter time. There was no snow, and I got on the bus. The bus takes about 45 minutes to get around just this one area, because at the end we have to go around all the farms to pick up 2 kids. They're on the very edge of town. So there was probably about 10 kids on the bus with me. We showed up at the edge of the town, and I'm looking out the window, and this it was tall and skinny, and it was walking almost parallel to the road. And I thought, I thought it was a farmer. So I was like, oh, what's he doing out before the sun even came up? And so I was looking at, and it only caught my attention that it might have been something else when it stopped, and it stood more straight, I would say. It got a little bit taller, and it put its arms to the side, its hands flat against its body, and its feet together, and stood straight, looking straight at the road. And the bus pulled up, and we were probably just a few feet away. I couldn't see any details, probably about 20 feet, 25. It started to churn a little bit more diagonal when the bus stopped. And the bus opened up its door. And when it opens the door, lights come on and the stop sign goes out and the lights on that go. And right as that happened, this thing dropped down, ran on all fours underneath what is called a wheel line. And they're out there and they water those fields. And it was just sitting there, and it ran underneath it on all fours and in a really fluent motion with, it didn't stop at all. It almost pushed up and just kept running on 2 legs and something small ran up and jumped on its back, and the bus doors closed, and the bus went, and that was it probably took only 30 seconds from when the doors opened to when I lost sight, and it moved across that entire field, almost all the way to the next area.
Let me ask you real quick, Nathan. I know you're talking about how it got up on 2 legs, or was on 2 legs when you first saw it. Was it all one color? I know you thought it was a farmer at first, I would imagine, because it's standing like a man. But was there any details that you remember from looking at this thing? Obviously, beyond what you've already explained.
It was completely black. It was darker than everything down, and it sounds weird, but it almost felt like the black was in lines going from the top of the head down. It was dark, and it was all one color.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how they dropped all 4s. It's kind of a bizarre movement, don't you think?
Yeah, it looked weird, but...
Yeah, did the bus driver or anyone notice it, or were you just kind of looking out the window and you picked up on it?
I haven't heard anyone else say anything. I know the town that I live in, a lot of kids have seen me listening to your podcast, and Sasquatch down here is like a joke, because a lot of them hunt, It's a joke to everyone down here. So I haven't heard anybody say anything.
To a lot of people it is, until they see it, you know what I mean? And then once you see it, it's a completely different story. I appreciate you listening to the podcast, man. That's very cool. What do you listen when you're on the bus heading to school, or?
Yeah, so I listen to it on the bus, and school you're not allowed to have phones or anything, and at work I listen to it, and in my free time I do too, a lot of the time.
I hear you, man. And so after you saw this thing, you go home and you told your dad, didn't you?
Yeah. And my dad was like, that's weird. It could be a farmer. We'll go check it out later.
And what happens when you went back to check it out?
So it was probably 3 weeks?
No, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah, it was probably 2 weeks after I saw it. He picked me up from work. I said, could we go look at the field? And he said, sure. So we drove out there. I gave him directions. We pulled up. We stopped. He looked. And he looked at those wheels, and and they were 6 feet tall. And this creature was a good 2 to 3 feet taller than the wheels that it was standing in front of.
Yeah, I remember when you and I were talking on the phone, you thought the wheels might have been 3 or 4 feet tall, and he was average size. But going back, seeing 6 feet tall wheels, and then he's a couple feet above that was a big creature. How far away from the bus was this thing? I know you're kind of looking out to a field. I mean, just your best guess.
I'd probably say 25 feet. The wheels, where the wheel line was that day, it was just barely a bit out from the road. It was 30 feet away from the road.
I gotcha. Well, I was going to chat with your dad, but before we get to him, Nathan, what do you think that Sasquatch is? What's your personal opinion?
I would like to say it's a flesh and blood creature, but, you don't know what it is yet. There's some weird stuff that goes with it.
Yeah, and then watching them move too, what you saw, that how they go down to all 4s is, I've seen it. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. Because it's not like, Nathan, if you and I got down and we got down on our knees, we get down on all 4, we do it a certain way. When they do it, it's like this weird collapse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've tried to recreate it and I can't. I don't know how it did it, but
yeah,
it did it.
I really appreciate you sharing what happened to you, Nathan, and listening to the show. I think is very cool because, one day I'll be long gone and the next generation will pick up the torch and run with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I I did want to say one thing too. I just want to thank you, Wes, because I've had teachers and students make fun of me for believing in this subject, and listening to your podcast really does make me feel better. And I wrote in because I was like, I saw something and it's been a few months, and I thought now that I went back and started listening to all the episodes, and I've heard you say, every encounter matters, so I thought I'd let you know, and I just wanted to thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words. It's every encounter does matter because you pick up weird little pieces of the puzzle, when you talk to people. But I do appreciate you coming on, man, very much. And don't let people get you down. It's all fun and games until you run into one, and then all of a sudden it's not so fun anymore. But they're very real.
I was in the bus. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and that's. I really appreciate you sending me your encounter, though. Dan, let me ask you. So when Nathan came and told you this, what was kind of going through your mind?
I just didn't know what to think. He said that when it went down under the wheel line, that it just did it so fluently and popped back up and ran. And then with whatever ran to it and jumped on its back, I haven't seen any pet monkeys with people around here. So it kind of I didn't know what to think.
Yeah, and is Nathan describing, is it like a watering truck on the farm?
No, so it's a wheel line. So it's a 6-foot tall metal wheel. It's got a pipe that runs through the center of it. I think they come in 20-foot lengths. They hook a bunch of these up, and then it has a motor that runs it down the field. The motor goes so fast, and
I have
it waters.
I have seen those before. Now I know exactly what he's talking about. So you go out there and he's telling you, hey, this thing was about 2 or 3 feet above this thing. One thing that's cool about you, Dan, is you didn't degrade him. And I know it's your son, but I mean, it happens a lot more often than you would think, where kids they see these things, they'll go tell their parents, and the parents are like, you didn't see anything. And I think it's super cool as a father that you would take him serious and go out there and look. Because, my experience with kids, they don't make stuff up. I don't think I've ever talked to a kid and I thought, well, this kid's got a strange imagination. Because they'll tell you certain things, throughout their encounter. But you actually had an encounter when you were a young man, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. So when I was 14, 15, I was on a scout camp on the Wasatch Front there in Utah. And we were fishing. And me and my friend, we were sitting there fishing, and we kept getting rocks and pine cones thrown at us. And we thought it was just other scouts messing around with us because they were small rocks, pine cones, stuff that if they hit you, it wasn't going to hurt you. So we just thought it was other scouts messing around with us. Didn't think much of it. And then a couple hours later, maybe 2-3 hours later, we were back at camp with all the other scouts and the leaders. We were cooking dinner, and we noticed, and I can't remember who noticed, one of the scouts noticed somebody walking across the hillside above us. And there wasn't really any trails up there. It was all just rocks and shell, and it was pretty treacherous. But this person was all black. There was no color separation. And the way it walked across the side of this mountain was really swift and fluent, and it was just really weird. And it always stuck in my memory because it was all the same color, and just the way it moved didn't look quite right.
Yeah, kind of a weird place for someone to be.
Yeah, there was no trails or anything up there, and I mean, it was probably a half mile above us, so you really couldn't see any details, but the way this thing moved across the mountaintop was just really weird.
Yeah. Let me ask you. I know you saw a Thunderbird too as well. You had a Thunderbird sighting, and I've talked to very few people that have actually seen this. I think they're out there though, because of the people who I have talked to. I really do believe it's out there. Tell me about the Thunderbird sighting. Kind of what were you doing and what happened?
So this is something that I've always wondered about too, because, I just don't know what I saw. And the only thing I can place it as is a Thunderbird. Growing up in Utah, going four-wheeling in Jeeps and trucks and ATVs is a big thing. So when we were 18, 19, we spent a lot of time up in the mountains driving around, four-wheeling. And this particular day, we were up in the Wasatch Front again on a dirt road, four-wheel drive road. We were quite a ways back, a couple miles into the mountains, and I noticed this person sitting on the side of the hill. And what's this person doing out in the middle of nowhere, sitting on the side of the hill? And as we got closer, we just couldn't figure out whatever this was. It didn't look right, and it was big. So the only thing we could think of was it was a person, because it didn't look like a cow or a deer or an elk or a bear. So we were in a Jeep Wrangler, had the top off, no doors, summertime, being teenagers. As we got up to this, whatever it was, it spread its wings, and one flap kind of jumped off the side of the mountain, glided over the top of us. And when it got over the top of the Jeep Wranglers, the wings were probably 5 feet in front of the Jeep Wrangler to 5 feet behind the Jeep Wrangler. And it was only maybe 10 feet above us. And this was the biggest bird I've ever seen. It looked like an eagle. It was all brown, a dark brown color. When it was sitting on the hill, it almost looked black. It was that dark. But it had an eagle's beak, and I've just never been able to find any bird that's 20 feet wingspan plus that matches that description. The biggest bird that could even be around here is probably a California condor, and condors look like vultures, not eagles. So I'm not sure what I saw, but it was by far the biggest bird I've ever seen. I mean, it was so much bigger than any other bird I've ever seen that it just freaks me out thinking about it.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people. I've heard a lot of those encounters, like down in Texas. A lot of people or New Mexico is another one where they'll talk about seeing these birds that are like you described. They're huge. It's weird. You know what I mean? It's so weird that there would be something out there that big flying around, yet people see them. Let me going back to Sasquatch for a moment. What do you think that Sasquatch is, Dan?
That's a hard question. So I'm kind of with my boy. I hope they're a flesh and blood creature. I really don't know what they are. I worry that they're some kind of Nephilim type creature, something from a long time ago that has special powers. I don't know. It's a hard question.
Yeah, it is a hard question. It's a fun question, though. It's not meant to be like a gotcha moment, because there really is no wrong answers. And I've learned a lot from listening to other people what they think it is. Kind of makes me stop and think, as far as other opinions. It makes sense, though, that you would go back and take Nathan at his word and go back to the area where he saw this thing, because you had seen something very strange yourself.
Yeah, when you see weird stuff, you know that weird stuff exists. So when he came up to me and said, "I seen this and I don't know what to make of it," you kind of just have to help him try to figure out what he saw.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share what happened to you.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and Nathan, thank you again for sending me the email and writing in and telling me about you being here. And I know you had 2 encounters out there in Oregon off McKenzie Pass. It's kind of notorious for sightings, but how long ago did this happen, Dan? The first one?
The first one was in September of 2018.
Pretty recent, really.
Yeah, it's relatively fresh.
Well, if you would, walk us into that first encounter, kind of tell us what you were doing and
Sure.
What happened.
So I was a delivery driver out in Oregon. I did a route that went from Eugene to Bend, Oregon, and it was always middle of the night. I'd come across that pass at like between 2 and 4 a.m., somewhere in there. And things started off kind of slow, and I didn't immediately realize what was going on and just put it up as disturbances in nature. But so I'd be driving and I would start hearing some howls and, just kind of random weird noises that I couldn't identify, and trying to find an explanation. I would just know, nature, some weird bird I don't know. And eventually something like started hitting my truck. I don't know if something was tossed at my truck or not, but to me, it almost sounded like a flat hand just slapping on the side of the box in the back.
And
that happened.
Is this when you were driving, Dan?
Yeah. That's the really odd part. So it hit it pretty hard, but there was never any damage on the truck. And anybody that knows those fiberglass shells on the box trucks, they're not crazy strong. If a big guy, that really wants to, could put a hole in there with their fist. So the first time it happened, I was trying to explain it away with it being a bird. But then it happened 2 more times, and I just really, it had me dumbstruck. I didn't know what would be doing that. And it was always more or less in the same spot too. But never any damage on the truck. Eventually that all led up to my actual sighting this all really started happening more and more over a 2-week period. And then one morning I was driving up there and I spotted some movement up the road from me, just kind of corner of my eye in headlights. And I thought it was a deer or bear, something crossing the road. So I slowed down and the road turned slightly. And as I was coming out of that turn, my headlights illuminated like a humanoid figure in the road, just standing there. First thought was it's a person, and then you're like thinking, well, why in the heck is there a person out here in the middle of nowhere? And at this point, we're 25 miles away from the closest town. Like there's nothing, no lights, no anything out there. And as I'm getting closer, I see something hanging off the body, and it reminded me of a ghillie suit. So I was thinking, you got a million thoughts going through your head. I was wondering if it's a hunter in a ghillie suit, and then I was wondering why in the heck he'd be out there and just standing on the road like that. And as I got closer, I realized that it wasn't a hunter. And what really gave that away was the arms. They were hanging past the knees. They were just way too long. And the figure was, I put it between 7 and 8 foot tall, not very wide, like most descriptions I seem to hear, like the broad shoulders and the massive body. This guy didn't look all that. It was pretty slender. The hair was all matted up. Just, it looked not taken care of or not healthy. I mean, I don't know how to put it. I don't know their hygiene. But once I realized what it was, or what it wasn't, I should say, my mind just kind of went blank and I kept on driving. I didn't even think of stopping. I was just going so confused. And as I got about 50 feet close to it, it made 2 steps off the side of the road to the right, which is nothing but fields of lava rock. So it's not really terrain that's easy to walk through or that I don't, see a hunter going into. And I drove another 30 seconds and kind of just mind going, what is that? What is that? What did I just see? And I stopped and pulled over. I got my flashlight and got out of my truck and kind of walked back a little and started looking around, and I didn't see anything. I couldn't explain it. I definitely wasn't a human just by size and proportions. And so that was quite confusing.
Yeah, very confusing, especially when you're not expecting it, and you come around the corner and it's right there. There is a lot of reports off McKenzie Pass. I've talked to a lot of people have seen them up there.
I've always kind of imagined, and before this happened, I wasn't all that involved in the subject. Let's put it that way. I thought most of it was just old legends and mythology, and now it's kind of pop culture, obviously, that perception came to a stop that morning for me, and it changes your whole worldview somewhat, because then you start wondering, like, well, what else that I thought isn't real is going to be out there or could be out there.
Yeah, it definitely changes your worldview. I mean, when you see these things, it's almost kind of like, remember Windows when it would reboot? It's kind of like that's what your brain does, after you see it.
No, that's actually a really good comparison, because it everything's different after.
Yeah, absolutely. There was an incident with another delivery driver, wasn't there?
Correct. Yeah. So this happened just a couple weeks after my first sighting. It was a little farther up the road. My job was a transfer driver. So I would meet another guy. He'd bring a truck and I'd bring one, and, we'd swap around, and I'd head back to the yard and he'd go do his thing. So we'd meet in the dark. It was like usually about 4:30 in the morning. It was a secluded parking lot outside of any close town, surrounded by woods on all three sides, and then just a small opening off through the gravel onto the highway. And we'd always met there, wasn't never any issues. The other driver was up from that area. He seemed perfectly comfortable when we were out there, And so this morning we had our trucks pulled up next to each other, and we were talking. For me, it was a 2.5 to 3 hour drive, and same for him. So once we met, we'd always just kind of hang out for a few, take a break, talk, stretch. And we were doing that that morning, and we started hearing voices. It almost sounded like a full-on conversation between at least two different people. But it was the type of conversation where you can hear it, but you can't make out the words, like when you hear a conversation through a wall. And we were thinking, like, man, that's weird. We're out here in the middle of nowhere. Who else would be out here in the dark, no less? So I always had a flashlight with me, and we kind of walked out, and we looked around, and it got quiet once we were out. And we were like, okay, it's weird. Conversation stopped. Couldn't see anybody. So we went back to where we were. We were talking, continued talking, and it started back up. And then it started with whistles. You'd still hear what sounded like a conversation, but there was also like muffled whistles going on. And I stepped back out from between the trucks, and they stop again. And I see the other guy's getting kind of freaked out at this point. He's starting to seem nervous. I don't think he was full on scared, but at that point he was just nervous that somebody else was out there. And it stopped again. And I turned around, and the minute I turned around, start walking back, it started up again. And at that point, I don't remember exactly what I said, if I just yelled hello or who's there, or, something along those lines. And no response. It stayed quiet for a minute, and then we started hearing movements around us. And not just, what one person walking. It was loud. It made a lot of noise, like elk full on stomping through the woods, kind of that sort of thing. But it was more than just one. And then that paired with the talking and the whistles, and it was getting louder and louder. And the other driver was just getting freaked out at this point. Like, now he's starting to just full on scared. don't know how else to put it. I'm a concealed carrier at that point. I don't know what I was thinking. I felt threatened enough to where I actually pulled my pistol and had my flashlight and started kind of walking towards the tree line where I started hearing the noises from. Just my mind went into that spot of I'm going to find out what's going on, who's messing with me type of deal. And I'm thinking it's people, at this point. And I start walking towards that tree line, and the other guy is so terrified almost. He's just yelling for me and like, stop, come back. And I kind of realized like, yeah, probably shouldn't be wandering off in the woods by myself like that in the middle of the night, not knowing who's out there or what's out there. So slowly walked back, and we both got into our trucks and got out of there. Unfortunately, we had to keep meeting there the next coming weeks, but we never had anything happen again. I started trying, to find answers, and like everybody else, go on the internet and try and figure out, just looking for similar accounts. The best I could find was the Plateau Indians have their reservation, I think about 20 miles away from where we were, basically just on the other side of that forest. And they had their legends of stick Indians that would, from my understanding, their belief is they would try and lure kids and other people into the woods, and do whatever they do, and you wouldn't see them again. Information's kind of limited on what I could find online. I actually did try and reach out to the tribe just to get a better explanation. Not to, be a researcher or publish anything or anything. I was just looking for answers because I'm starting to wonder if you're going crazy or what,
Yeah, you kind of feel that way after an encounter, like you're kind of losing it, Yeah,
I get it. You want answers.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of curious. So there was a time up there when you had a run-in with a cop, didn't you?
So about a week and a half after that happened, I got to that meeting spot first. The other driver wasn't there yet. And I see a sheriff's truck pull up, same parking lot. And deputy gets out, and he's got a flashlight, and he's looking around the tree line. He's mostly shining onto the ground, and he's kind of walking around and just looking. I have no idea what he was looking for. I really wanted to go have a conversation with him and ask, but middle of the night, middle of nowhere, I didn't know if it was so smart to approach him out there. So I held off, but he was out there a good 10, 15 minutes looking for something, obviously looking for something, why else are you shining your flashlight up and down onto the ground and like up and down and trying to find a path or whatever? And he just eventually got back in his truck and drove off. I didn't see him pick anything up or take pictures of anything, but clearly he was looking for something. And I don't think it was just him losing his keys out there at some point, because there's really nothing out there. There wasn't a hiking trail or anything. It's just a parking lot, a pull off, mostly used by truck drivers having to take their break there.
Yeah, even now, it's I know it was only a couple years ago, but it's a pretty lonely spot out there. You're kind of on your own out there.
It is. There's it's quiet as can be and dark as can be. There isn't anything, and at that time of day, there isn't really even traffic, on the highway or anything like that. So, I guess it would be a perfect spot if you don't want to be spotted.
Yeah, it's kind of eye-opening to go from not believing and kind of thinking it's all nonsense to seeing it for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. It was a big shock. It just changes everything because, like I said, you start wondering what else you're wrong about, or what else we as a whole are wrong about, and what else is out there that we just kind of brush off. To me, it seemed like there was a difference between those two encounters too. The first one, I believe I may have just been annoying the creature by coming up there every morning, loud truck and a reefer unit on the back. And, that's kind of how I interpret it. I obviously don't know, but that's how it felt to me. I didn't feel threatened necessarily. When I saw it, I just felt like he was I say he, I don't know what it was, but that's how it seemed like. Just you're in my area and I'm getting tired of it type of thing. And the other one felt a little more unsettling, I guess, because there's something with some intellect that was clearly trying to lure one of us away or both of us away from where we were. That's a little more unsettling to me because that's not just an animal.
Yeah, and to hear the language is weird. Even though you couldn't make out what you were hearing, the fact that it sounded like people talking is unnerving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it is. I don't know if it is an actual language or if it was imitation or what, but just that somebody or something is trying to get you into there is unsettling to me. Like it's clearly and aware, and it has a certain amount of intellect to be doing that. That's not something a cougar or a bear is going to be doing to you out there.
I'm kind of curious. What do you think that they are, Dan? What's your opinion as far as what this thing is?
I'm going to have to go with somewhere along the evolutionary line it split off. I think it's flesh and blood. And I don't know what tribe it is, but I've heard there is a native tribe that refers to them as as the lost tribe or something like that. Or missing tribe, something. I forgot exactly but I think that's probably in the grand sense of it what it is. It's a different version of us, an older version that came before us, something along those lines. I mean, clearly they are smart, and I think they are masters of their surroundings, and that's why, we don't see them more often, or you don't hear as much anymore about it. But
yeah,
I think the wild man thing is probably fairly onto it.
I gotcha. I was going to ask if you ever went back there, but I know that you moved and you're down there in, how's the summers down there in Texas? Is it brutal?
Yeah, they're hot. We've been above 100 a bunch, most of the days since I've gotten here in June. So it's definitely some getting used to, but no snow, which I'm a big fan of. I wasn't a huge fan of those winters. But to answer that question, I was still in Oregon for a little bit after, and I got those days where I was just ready to pack out and go out there, and like I'm the guy that's going to find all the answers, but it just always came back down to, it might not be the best idea to actually go do it. That's where what came to my mind. I didn't get the impression I was welcomed, you know what I mean? So I didn't want to go test my luck out there. I drove, every time I drove by, for sure, I tried getting glimpses and trying to find something, see if I can see something on the side or just anything really. But yeah, it was definitely eye-opening, and I'd pay a lot more attention to my surroundings now if I do go out for hikes or walks in the woods and stuff like that,
Yeah,
it's not traumatizing.
Yeah, it's very life-changing though. Now that you're aware of what's out there, I can totally see that.
I was fortunate enough to where it wasn't a violent encounter, so, I think that makes all the difference too.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, not every encounter is going to be violent. Not every encounter is going to be, it's coming for you. There's a lot of encounters where it's not. And I think we can only assess the situation based on our own experience with what we've experienced. If you came across a cougar and your experience with it was you were able to pet it, you would think all cougars you could pet, but that's not quite the case.
Yeah, and then you lose your hand the next time. No,
exactly.
You're right, and from what I gather, it seems to be a regional thing often too. I hear down here in Texas, they don't seem to be as nice. Like from what I hear, it seems to be usually more hostile than what I encountered.
Yeah, they seem to be a little bit more hostile down there. I'm not really sure why. The encounters are definitely more hostile down there.
It must be the heat. They just don't like it. They get cranky.
I can't blame them.
No.
I'd be cranky. I'd be cranky down there too if I had to run around the forest in that humidity.
Yeah. No, and I don't know. Like I said, the one I saw was very slender. So maybe it wasn't healthy, or I don't know. Maybe it would have normally been a different reaction from it. But yeah, it didn't feel threatening necessarily. I took it as kind of a warning.
Yeah, and it's a cool opportunity, though. You got to see it. You know, I mean, you had a chance to actually see something that most people don't think is real or is even out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's I really appreciate you coming on and sharing it.
No,
dude.
it's been a pleasure, man. I